Ireland is a lush green island in northwestern Europe, known for its stunning landscapes, rich Celtic history, vibrant pubs and warm people, politically divided into the independent Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, featuring a temperate climate, Gaelic heritage and modern EU membership. Its location, west of Great Britain, surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean, the Celtic Sea and the Irish Sea. Famous for rolling green hills, rugged coastlines like the Cliffs of Moher, limestone pavements and beautiful rivers like the Shannon and the Blackwater. Ireland is the second largest island of the British Isles, the third largest in Europe, and the 20th largest in the world. As of 2022, the population of the entire island is just over 7 million, with 5.1 million in the Republic of Ireland and 1.9 million in Northern Ireland, ranking it as the second most populous island in Europe after Great Britain. The geography of Ireland comprises relatively low-lying mountains surrounding a central plain, with several navigable rivers extending inland. Much of Ireland was woodland until the end of the Middle Ages. Today, woodland makes up about 10% of the island, compared with a European average of over 33%, with most of it being non-native conifer plantations. Its lush vegetation is a product of its mild climate, which is influenced by the Atlantic Ocean and thus very moderate, and winters are milder than expected for such a northerly area, although summers are cooler than those in continental Europe. Rainfall and cloud cover are abundant. Gaelic Ireland had emerged by the 1st century AD. The island was Christianized from the 5th century onwards. During this period, Ireland was divided amongst petty kings, who in turn served under the kings of the traditional provinces, vying for dominance and the title of High King of Ireland. Following the 12th century Anglo-Norman invasion, England claimed sovereignty. However, English rule did not extend over the whole country until the 16th to the 17th century Tudor conquest, which led to the colonization by settlers from Britain. In the 1690s, a system of Protestant English rule was designed to materially disadvantage the Catholic majority and Protestant dissenters, and was extended during the 18th century. With the Acts of Union in 1801, Ireland became a part of the United Kingdom. The Great Famine of the 1840s saw the population fall by over 20% through debt and emigration. A war of independence in the early 20th century was followed by the partition of the island, leading to the creation of the Irish Free State, which became increasingly sovereign over the following decades until it declared a republic in 1948, and Northern Ireland, which remained a part of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland saw much civil unrest from the late 1960s until the 1990s. This subsided following the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. In 1973, both the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, with Northern Ireland as part of it, joined the European Economic Community. Following a referendum vote in 2016, the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland included, left the European Union in 2020. Northern Ireland was granted a special limited status and allowed to operate within the EU single market for goods without being in the European Union. Irish culture has had a significant influence on other cultures, especially in the field of literature. Alongside mainstream Western culture, a strong indigenous culture exists, as expressed through Gaelic games, Irish music, Irish language and Irish dance. The island's culture shares many features with that of Great Britain, including the English language and sports such as association football, rugby, horse racing, golf and boxing. The earliest written records of Ireland come from the classical Greco-Roman geographers. Ptolemy in his Almagest refers to Ireland as Micra Britannia, Little Britain, in contrast to the larger island which he called Megala Britannia, Great Britain. In his map of Ireland, in his later work, Geography, Ptolemy refers to Ireland as Luernia and to Great Britain as Albion. These names were likely to have been local names for the islands at the time. The earlier names, in contrast, were likely to have been coined before direct contact with local peoples was made. The Romans refer to Ireland by this name too in its Latinized form, Hibernia or Scotia. Ptolemy records 6 nations inhabiting every part of Ireland in 100 AD. The relationship between the Roman Empire and kingdoms of ancient Ireland is unclear. However, finds of Roman coins have been made, for example at the Iron Age settlement of Freestone Hill near Gowran and Newgrange. Ireland continues as a patchwork of rival kingdoms. However, beginning in the 7th century, a concept of national kingship gradually became articulated through the concept of a High King of Ireland. Medieval Irish literature portrays an almost unbroken sequence of high kings stretching back thousands of years, but some modern historians believe the scheme was constructed in the 8th century to justify the status of powerful political groupings by projecting the origins of their rule into the remote past. All of the Irish kingdoms had their own kings, but were nominally subject to the High King. The High King was drawn from the ranks of the provisional kings and ruled also the royal kingdom of Meath, with a ceremonial capital at the Hill of Tara. The concept did not become a political reality until the Viking Age, and even then was not a consistent one. Ireland did have a culturally unifying rule of law. The early written judicial system, the Brehon laws, administered by a professional class of jurists known as the Brehons. How and when Ireland became Celtic has been debated for close to a century, with the migrations of the Celts being one of the more enduring themes of archaeological and linguistic studies. The most recent genetic research strongly associates the spread of Indo-European languages, including Celtic, through Western Europe, with a people bringing a composite Bell-Beaker culture, with its arrival in Britain and Ireland dated to around the middle of the 3rd millennium BC. According to John T. Koch and others, Ireland in the late Bronze Age was part of a maritime trading culture called the Atlantic Bronze Age, that also included Britain, Western France and Iberia. and that this is where Celtic languages developed. This contrasts with the traditional view that their origin lies in mainland Europe with the Hallstatt culture. The long-standing traditional view is that the Celtic language, Ogham script, and culture were brought to Ireland by waves of invading or migrating Celts from mainland Europe. This theory draws on the Lebor Gabála Érenn, a medieval Christian pseudo-history of Ireland, along with the presence of Celtic culture, language and artefacts found in Ireland, such as Celtic bronze spears, shields, torches and other finely crafted Celtic associated possessions. The theory holds that there were 4 separate Celtic invasions of Ireland. The Britanni were said to be the first, followed by the Belgae from northern Gaul or Britain. Later, Lagin tribes from America were said to have invaded Ireland and Britain more or less simultaneously. Lastly, the Milesians were said to have reached Ireland from northern Iberia or Gaul. It was claimed that a second wave, named the Urni, belonging to the Belgae people of northern Gaul, began arriving about the 6th century BC. They were said to have given their name to the island. During the last glacial period and until 16,000 BC, much of Ireland was periodically covered in ice. The relative sea level was less than 50 metres lower, resulting in an ice bridge, but not a land bridge, forming between Ireland and Great Britain. By 14,000 BC, this ice bridge existed only between Northern Ireland and Scotland, and by 12,000 BC, Ireland was completely separated from Great Britain. Later, around 6,100 BC, Great Britain became separated from continental Europe. Until recently, the earliest evidence of human activity in Ireland was dated at 12,500 years ago, demonstrated by a butcher's bear bone found in a cave in County Clare. In 2021, a reindeer bone with chop marks, which had been found at Castle Pook Cave near Doneraile in County Cork in the early 20th century, during Richard J. Usher's excavations, was dated to 33,000 years by Ruth Carden from the School of Archaeology in the University College Dublin, pushing back the earliest signs of human activity by 20,000 years. By about 8,000 BC, more sustained occupation of the island has been shown, with evidence for Mesolithic communities around the island. Sometime before 4000 BC, Neolithic settlers introduced cereal cultivars, domesticated animals such as cattle and sheep, built large timber buildings and stone monuments. The earliest evidence for farming in Ireland and Great Britain is from Thurles Cove in County Kerry, where a flint knife, cattle bones and a sheep's tooth were carbon dated to c. 4350 BC. Field systems were developed in different parts of Ireland, including the Céide fields, that were preserved beneath a blanket of peat to the present day. An extensive field system, arguably the oldest in the world, consisted of small divisions separated by dry stone walls. The fields were farmed for several centuries between 3500 BC and 3000 BC. Wheat and barley were the principal crops. The Bronze Age began around 2500 BC, with technology changing people's everyday lives during this period through innovations such as the wheel, harnessing oxen, weaving textiles, brewing alcohol, and metalworking, which produced new weapons and tools, along with fine gold decorations and jewellery such as brooches and torques. On May the 1st, 1169, an expedition of Cambro-Norman knights, with an army of about 600 men, landed at Bannostrand in present-day County Wexford. It was led by Richard de Clare, known as Strongbow, owing to his prowess as an archer. The invasion, which coincided with a period of renewed Norman expansion, was at the invitation of Dermot MacMurrough, King of Leinster. In 1166, MacMurrough had fled to Anjou in France, following a war involving Tiernan O'Rourke of Breffni, and sought the assistance of the Angevin King Henry II in recapturing his kingdom. In 1171, Henry arrived in Ireland in order to review the general progress of the expedition. He wanted to re-exert royal authority over the invasion which was expanding beyond his control. Henry successfully reimposed his authority over Strongbow and the Cambro-Norman warlords, and persuaded many of the Irish kings to accept him as their overlord, an arrangement confirmed in 1175 in the Treaty of Windsor. Now folks, perhaps it's the ultimate in madness, or it's the best in keeping healthy. And I'd like to think it was the latter. But it's early, it's 6:10 a.m. on a bank holiday Monday morning. The countryside is asleep. The sheep are up here looking at me in bewilderment. And if you look out there, you can see where we were yesterday at the Martello Tower. And last night before sunset, the majestic standing stone. The invasion was legitimised by reference to provisions of the alleged papal bull Laudabiliter, issued by an Englishman, Adrian IV, in 1155. The document apparently encouraged Henry to take control in Ireland in order to oversee the financial administrative reorganisation of the Irish Church and its integration into the Roman Church system. Some restructuring had already begun at the ecclesiastical level following the Synod of Kells in 1152. There has been significant controversy regarding the authenticity of Laudabiliter, and there is no general agreement as to whether the bull was genuine or a forgery. Further, it had no standing in the Irish legal system. From the mid-14th century, after the Black Death, Norman settlements in Ireland went into a period of decline. The Norman rulers and the Gaelic Irish elites intermarried, and the areas under Norman rule became Gaelicised. In some parts, a hybrid Hiberno-Norman culture emerged. In response, the Irish Parliament passed the Statutes of Kilkenny in 1367. These were a set of laws designed to prevent the assimilation of the Normans into Irish society by requiring English subjects in Ireland to speak English, follow English customs, and abide by English law. By the end of the 15th century, Central English authority in Ireland had all but disappeared, and the renewed Irish culture and language, albeit with Norman influences, was again dominant. English crown control remained relatively unshaken in an amorphous foothold around Dublin, known as the Pale, and under the provisions of Poyning's Law of 1494, Irish parliamentary legislation was subject to the approval of the English Privy Council. The title of King of Ireland was recreated in 1542 by Henry VIII, the then King of England of the Tudor dynasty. English rule was reinforced and expanded in Ireland during the latter part of the 16th century, leading to the Tudor conquest in Ireland. A near complete conquest was achieved by the turn of the 17th century, following the 9 Years' War and the flight of the Earls. This control was consolidated during the wars and conflicts of the 17th century. including the English and Scottish colonisation in the plantations of Ireland, the Wars of the Three Kingdoms and the Williamite War, Irish losses during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, which in Ireland included the Irish Confederacy and the Cromwellian conquest of Ireland, are estimated to include 20,000 battlefield casualties. 200,000 civilians are estimated to have died as a result of a combination of war-related famine, displacement, guerrilla activity and pestilence. A further 50,000 were sent into indentured servitude in the West Indies. Physician General William Petty estimated that 504,000 Catholic Irish and 112 Protestant settlers died, and 100,000 people were transported as a result of the war. If a pre-war population of 1.5 million is assumed, this would mean that the population was reduced by almost half. The religious struggles of the 17th century left a deep sectarian division in Ireland. Religious allegiance now determined the perception in law of loyalty to the Irish King and Parliament. After the passing of the Test Act in 1672 and the victory of the forces of the dual monarchy of William and Mary over the Jacobites, Roman Catholics and non-conforming Protestant dissenters were barred from sitting as members in the Irish Parliament. Under the emergent penal laws, Irish Roman Catholics and dissenters were increasingly deprived of various civil rights, even the ownership of hereditary property. Additional regressive punitive legislation followed in 1703, 1709 and 1728. The Great Frost struck Ireland and the rest of Europe between December 1739 and September 1741, after a decade of relatively mild winters. The winters destroyed store crops of potatoes and other staples, and the poor summers severely damaged the harvests. This resulted in the famine of 1740. An estimated 250,000 people, about 1/8 of the population, died from the ensuing pestilence and disease. The Irish government halted export of corn and kept the army in quarters, but did little more. Local gentry and charitable organisations provided relief, but could do little to prevent the ensuing mortality. In the aftermath of the famine, an increase in industrial production and a surge in trade brought a succession of construction booms. The population soared in the latter part of this century, and the architectural legacy of Georgian Ireland was built. In 1782, Poyning's Law was repealed, giving Irish legislative independence from Great Britain for the first time since 1495. The British government, however, still retained the right to nominate the Government of Ireland without the consent of the Irish Parliament. In 1798, members of the Protestant dissenter tradition, mainly Presbyterian, made common cause with Roman Catholics in a Republican rebellion inspired and led by the Society of United Irishmen, with the aim of creating an independent Ireland. Despite assistance from France, the rebellion was put down by British and Irish government and yeomanry forces. The rebellion lasted from the 24th of May to the 12th of October that year and saw the establishment of the short-lived Irish Republic, 1798, in the province of Connacht. It saw numerous battles across the island, with an estimated 30,000 people being killed. As a direct result of the 1798 rebellion, in its aftermath in 1800, the British and Irish Parliaments both passed Acts of Union that, with effect from the 1st of January 1801, merged the Kingdom of Ireland and the Kingdom of Great Britain to create a united Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The Great Famine of 1845 to 1851 devastated Ireland, as in those years Ireland's population fell by 1/3. More than 1 million people died from starvation and disease, with an additional million people emigrating during the famine, mostly to the United States and Canada. In the century that followed, an economic depression caused by the famine resulted in a further 1 million people emigrating. By the end of the decade, half of all immigration to the United States was from Ireland. The period of civil unrest that followed until the end of the 19th century is referred to as the Land War. Mass immigration became deeply entrenched and the population continued to decline until the middle of the 20th century. Immediately prior to the famine, the population was recorded as 8.2 million as by the 1841 census. The population has never returned to this level since. The population continued to fall until 1961. County Leitrim was the final Irish county to record a population increase post-famine in 2006. The 19th and 20th centuries saw the rise of modern Irish nationalism, primarily among the Roman Catholic population. The preeminent Irish political figure after the Union was Daniel O'Connell. He was elected as a Member of Parliament for Ennis in a surprise result, and despite being unable to take his seat as a Roman Catholic, O'Connell spearheaded a vigorous campaign that was taken up by the Prime Minister, the Irish-born soldier and statesman, the Duke of Wellington. Steering the Catholic Relief Bill through Parliament, aided by future Prime Minister Robert Peel, Wellington prevailed upon a reluctant George IV to sign the bill and proclaim it into law. George's father had opposed the plan of the early Prime Minister, Pitt the Younger, to introduce such a bill following the Union of 1801, fearing Catholic emancipation to be in conflict with the Act of Settlement of 1701. Daniel O'Connell led a subsequent campaign for the repeal of the Act of Union, which failed. Later in the century, Charles Stuart Parnell and others campaigned for autonomy with the Union, or Home Rule. Unionists, especially those located in Ulster, were strongly opposed to Home Rule, which they thought would be dominated by Catholic interests. After several attempts to pass a Home Rule bill through Parliament, it looked certain that one would finally pass through in 1914. To prevent this from happening, the Ulster Volunteers were formed in 1913 under the leadership of Edward Carson. Their formation was followed in 1914 by the establishment of the Irish Volunteers, whose aim was to ensure that the Home Rule Bill was passed. The Act was passed, but with the temporary exclusion of the 6 counties of Ulster, which later became Northern Ireland. Before it could be implemented, however, the Act was suspended for the duration of the First World War. The Irish Volunteers split into 2 groups. The majority, approximately 175,000 in number, under John Redmond, took the name of the National Volunteers and supported Irish involvement in the war. A minority, approximately 13,000, retained the Irish Volunteers name and opposed Ireland's involvement in the war. The Easter Rising of 1916 was carried out by the latter group together with a smaller socialist militia, the Irish Citizen Army. The British response, executing 15 leaders of the rising over a period of 10 days and imprisoning or interning more than 1,000 people, turned the mood of the country in favour of the rebels. Support for Irish republicanism increased, further due to the ongoing war in Europe, as well as the conscription crisis of 1918. The pro-independence Republican Party, Sinn Féin, received overwhelming endorsement in the general election of 1918. and in 1919 proclaimed an Irish Republic, setting up its own parliament, Dáil Éireann, and government. Simultaneously, the Volunteers, which became known as the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, launched a 3-year guerrilla war, which ended in a truce in July 1921, although violence continued until June 22, mostly in Northern Ireland. In December 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty was concluded between the British government and representatives of the Second Dáil. It gave Ireland complete independence in its home affairs and practical independence for foreign policy, but an opt-out clause allowed Northern Ireland to remain within the United Kingdom, which it immediately exercised. Additionally, members of the Free State Parliament were required to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution of the Irish Free State and make a statement of faithfulness to the King. Disagreement over these provisions led to a split in the national movement and a subsequent Irish Civil War between the new government of the Irish Free State and those opposed to the treaty led by Eamon de Valera. The Civil War was officially ended in May 1923 when de Valera issued a ceasefire order. During its first decade, the newly formed Irish Free State was governed by the victors of the Civil War. When de Valera achieved power, he took advantage of the Statute of Westminster and political circumstances to build upon inroads to greater sovereignty made by the previous government. The oath was abolished in 1937. A new constitution was adopted. This completed a process of gradual separation from the British Empire that governments had pursued since independence. However, it was not until 1949 that the state was declared officially to be the Republic of Ireland.